Welcome to the deep dive. We got a really interesting book recommendation from you all, Passionate Marriage, Keeping Love and Intimacy Alive in Committed Relationships by David Schnarch.
Hmm.
So today our mission is to really dig into it, pull out the core ideas about making long-term relationships work, especially around intimacy and sex.
Yeah, absolutely. And Schnarch, it's useful to know where he was coming from. He was a therapist, a teacher,
Right.
and he saw, well, gaps in how traditional therapy approached sex and marriage. Felt they kept them too separate, didn't really get at that desire for passion, for eroticism any couples have.
And he dedicated it to his wife, Ruth Morehouse. That says
It
something.
really does. It feels personal, deeply considered.
Totally. And the feedback you shared with me from listeners who read it,
Yeah.
wow, people talking about real aha moments.
Yeah, that came up a lot.
And like renewed hope, the idea that maybe things can get better, deeper, even with age. Someone called it a map.
A map, yeah. It's applicable to different kinds of relationships, focusing on growth.
And get this, potential for better sex and even side effects like more happiness, more empathy. Who wouldn't want that?
It definitely struck a chord. The main thing was this sense of getting a fresh perspective, not just tips, but a new way of understanding the whole dynamic.
Okay, so that's what we're doing today, getting into those key concepts for that fresh look.
That's the plan. Let's unpack the big ideas that offer that new lens on connection.
All right, first up, differentiation. I hear that word, and honestly, my brain goes straight to high school biology. Cells becoming specialized? Is that, like, way off?
No, actually, that's a surprisingly good starting point. Think of it like that, but for people in relationships.
Okay.
Differentiation is basically your ability to maintain a solid sense of who you are, your thoughts, feelings, values, even when you're deeply connected to someone else. It's being your own person within the relationship.
Right, not because of the relationship.
Exactly. Not getting totally swept up in your partner's moods or needing their constant approval to feel okay. It's having that internal anchor.
So, the opposite of that, he calls it emotional fusion.
Emotional fusion. That's where boundaries blur. You kind of borrow your sense of self from each other.
Borrow. How does that work?
Well, it's like your emotional state gets really tangled up with your partner's. If they're upset, you instantly feel upset too, almost automatically. There's this heavy dependence.
Okay, I can picture that.
Differentiation lets you still connect, still empathize deeply, but without losing your own footing.
Hmm.
You can see their feelings, understand them, but you don't necessarily absorb them or feel responsible for fixing them just so you can feel better.
Got it. So it's not about being cold or distant.
Not at all.
Yeah.
That's a common misconception. Schnarch is really clear. It's not selfishness. It's about valuing both yourself and your partner as distinct individuals.
Mhm.
You can still prioritize their needs, but it comes from choice and care, not, fear or obligation.
The book uses Bill and Joan as an example of fusion. Right. What did that look like for them?
Yeah, Bill and Joan. Early on, they were classic fusion, a simple disagreement. It felt like a major personal attack to both of them.
Wow.
That huge reaction to just having different opinions, that's fusion. It shows a lack of that solid inner self that can handle disagreement without feeling like existentially threatened.
And it feels like that kind of intensity could easily be mistaken for, passionate love.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the tricky part. We often confuse the intensity of fusion with the depth of real intimacy. Schnarch even points to some pretty dramatic media examples.
Nick.
Well, cases like the Buttafuocos, the Bobbitts, Tanya Harding, O.J. Simpson, obviously extreme examples.
Definitely extreme.
But they illustrate in a really stark way the destructive potential when boundaries just completely dissolve, when there's zero differentiation.
He also brings up borrowed functioning and the pseudo-self. What's going on there?
Right, this is key. Borrowed functioning is when you appear more capable in some area because you're essentially relying on your partner.
Ah, like one person always does the bills, so the other seems less competent with money.
Exactly that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the pseudo-self is the sense of self you build on top of that fusion. It can be inflated, like, I'm great because my partner props me up, or deflated, I'm useless without them.
And that masks the real issues.
Totally. It prevents real differentiation because people who aren't well differentiated get really invested in keeping that fusion going to support their shaky pseudo-self. They cling, but it's often out of need, not genuine intimacy.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, Schnarch makes a big deal about moving from sensation-based sex to intimacy-based sex. What's the difference there?
It's a really fundamental shift, yeah. He challenges that common view of sex as just like a biological urge needing release.
Tension relief model.
Right. And he argues that if that's all you focus on, you can actually miss wanting your partner. It becomes about the act, the sensation, not the person.
So the goal is shifting focus from just the physical feelings to actually desiring the person you're with.
Precisely. The story he tells about Karen and Ken is a great illustration. Ken realized teasing wasn't just a technique. It was an attitude. It needed real emotional engagement with her.
And for Karen,
For Karen, that shift felt like freedom. It wasn't just mechanics. It was connecting with Ken, wanting him. It sparked a whole new level of desire.
the book also talks about societal beliefs that kind of get in the way of this intimacy-based sex, especially long-term. What are those?
Well, there's that old chestnut. Men trade love for sex. Women trade sex for love.
Oh, yeah, hear that one all the time.
Schnarch basically says that's pretty immature thinking, confusing sexual immaturity with, like, fixed gender traits. He argues as people mature sexually.
Things change.
Yeah, women often get more comfortable owning their desire, enjoying sex for itself, and men often become more interested in the intimacy, the connection side of it. They actually become more similar.
Huh. That flips the script. So, sexual compatibility isn't about being the same from the start.
Not necessarily. It might be more about becoming more aligned as you both mature and differentiate. It's a cool idea.
Okay, what's another belief that messes things up?
The overemphasis on sensate focus. This technique came about to help people focus on physical sensations, tune out performance anxiety.
Right, I've heard of that.
And it has its place, maybe initially,
Yeah.
but Schnarch worries that relying on it too much long-term makes it all about genital response, about orgasm, and you lose the connection, the desire for the partner. He kind of provocatively calls the potential result horizontal, eyes closed, cadaver-like sex.
Oof, okay. So focusing only on sensation can actually kill intimacy.
It can definitely detract from it, yeah. Making sensation the only goal misses the bigger picture.
So if sensation isn't the be-all and end-all, what's the alternative Schnarch points to?
He calls it wall socket sex.
Wall socket sex.
Yeah, think of it like plugging into this intense energy. It's a deep physical and emotional union. Mutual desire, breathtaking intimacy, real meaningfulness. It's way beyond just getting off.
So it's not even necessarily about orgasm.
It can happen with or without orgasm.
Mm.
And interestingly, he notes that the first time people experience this, if they're used to the sensation focus model, it can feel surprising, maybe even a little unsettling.
Because it's so different, more vulnerable.
Exactly. It demands a deeper level of showing up, of being present with each other.
Okay, let's talk communication. Or maybe the paradox of it. We always hear good communication is key, but Schnarch seems to complicate that a bit.
He does. He pushes back on the idea that good communication just means your partner finally sees things exactly your way.
Ah.
He suggests that when someone complains, we don't communicate, often what they really mean is, I don't like what you're telling me. I refuse to accept your perspective on this.
So it's not a skills deficit necessarily, but a receiving problem.
Often, yeah. It's resistance to the message, not just a failure to transmit it clearly.
So just like learning I statements won't fix everything.
Probably not on its own, no. Because, Schnarch points out, a lot of initial compatibility is built on what he calls other validated intimacy.
Other validated. Meaning.
Meaning you feel good because your partner validates you, tells you you're okay, understands you perfectly. Early on, that feels amazing.
Sure, who doesn't want that?
Right. But if your sense of okayness depends entirely on them constantly propping you up, well, that can breed resentment later. It's built on a fear of them disagreeing or not validating you.
Okay, so if relying on the other person for validation isn't sustainable, what's the goal?
Self-validated intimacy. That's the key for the long haul. Learning to validate yourself, your own feelings, your own reality, without needing your partner to co-sign it constantly.
Which sounds like it goes back to differentiation again.
Exactly. It all loops back. Having that solid core, that ability to know and trust your own experience.
So this suggests that maybe some therapies that focus only on communication skills or empathy might be missing something.
That's his argument.
Yeah.
That they can sometimes accidentally keep people stuck in needing that other validation, which actually gets in the way of developing real self-validation and differentiation. Plus, he talks about how anxiety is contagious in relationships. And fusion can become this, like, coping mechanism for poorly differentiated people to manage anxiety together, which just deepens the dependence.
Okay, what about when couples hit those walls? That feeling of being stuck. He calls it gridlock. Sounds pretty final.
It feels final, for sure. Gridlock is that awful state, same fights, no resolution, feeling like you're falling out of love.
Yeah, sounds bleak.
But here's the paradox. Schnarch says gridlock, ironically, can be the very thing that pushes people toward growth. It forces you to confront your own stuff, nudges you toward differentiation, even if it feels terrible.
So getting stuck isn't the end. It's a potential turning point. How do you navigate that? He mentions the sexual crucible approach.
Right, the sexual crucible, it uses the powerful link between intimacy, sex, and differentiation to work through the gridlock. It sees the sexual relationship not just as, sex, but as this intense space where these dynamics play out. Addressing issues there, desire differences, intimacy blocks, can create breakthroughs in the overall relationship gridlock because it forces you to confront core issues about yourself and how you relate.
Using sex as a catalyst for broader growth. Interesting.
It's about using that intensity.
The outline also mentions two-choice dilemmas as grindstones of differentiation. What are those?
Yeah. Those are the inevitable conflicts in marriage where your needs clash with your partners, and there's no easy answer. Like one wants more social life, the other needs more downtime.
The classic introvert-extrovert dilemma.
Exactly. Or differing desires for closeness versus space. These ongoing tensions, these unavoidable choices, they act like grindstones.
Yeah.
They force you to clarify what you really want, what your limits are, and how to navigate difference without just giving in or blowing up.
It sharpens your sense of self.
Precisely, if you engage with them.
And the book uses Audrey and Peter to show what happens when you don't engage and mentions normal marital sadism. That sounds not good.
Yeah, Audrey and Peter showed how couples can kind of dodge those dilemmas. And normal marital sadism, it sounds harsh, but Schnarch doesn't mean like intentional cruelty.
Okay.
It's more about the unconscious ways we might undermine intimacy or hold our partner back, precisely because we're avoiding our own growth, avoiding facing those uncomfortable two-choice dilemmas ourselves. It's subtle sabotage born from fear of differentiation.
Wow. Okay. And he connects this to sexual desire differences too.
Absolutely. He stresses that differing levels of desire are basically inevitable in long-term relationships. True sexual compatibility, he argues, isn't having identical libidos.
What is it then?
It's the couple's willingness and ability to navigate those differences openly, respectfully, creatively. That's where the real compatibility lies.
So it's about the process, not the starting point.
Exactly. How you handle the difference is key.
Okay, let's talk tools. The book apparently offers practical techniques for connection and self-soothing. What are some examples?
One that sounds simple but is quite profound is hugging till relaxed.
Right. Just hugging longer.
Kind of, but with intention. It's not a quick squeeze. It's holding the hug, breathing, staying present, even when maybe, especially when you feel that urge to pull away or get fidgety. The goal is to find your own internal calm while in that close contact. It builds your capacity to self-soothe, to manage your own anxiety right there with your partner, which boosts differentiation.
That actually reminds me of what child development folks like T. Barry Brazelton say about letting kids learn to soothe themselves.
Yes. Schnarch makes that exact parallel. The ability to self-regulate, to manage our own internal state, is fundamental for healthy connection at any age. He tells a sweet story about his own daughter, Sarah, consciously getting herself quiet before doing something scary. It shows that capacity is innate, but we often lose touch with it. And the key insight is that real letting go in intimacy requires a stronger grip on yourself, better self-control, not less.
Interesting. Control to let go. What other tools?
Another one is eyes-open kissing.
Okay, that sounds intense.
It can be. It's about deliberately using that negotiation that happens in foreplay, but making it more direct. Keeping eyes open fosters this immediate, vulnerable emotional contact. It can really amp up both intimacy and eroticism because you're truly seeing and being seen.
Less hiding, more connection.
Exactly. And building on that is eyes open orgasm, which, as you can imagine, represents an even deeper level of engagement.
Wow, yeah.
It requires a lot of self-acceptance, emotional transparency. It's very different from the more internal, sometimes separate experience of a closed-eye orgasm, where you might tune the partner out to focus just on sensation.
Okay, then Schnarch gets into different dimensions of sexual experience beyond just the physical mechanics. What are those?
Right. He identifies 3 dimensions that add depth: sexual trance, partner engagement, and role play. Different ways to experience connection sexually.
Let's break those down. Doing a partner, what does that mean?
Doing is described as this active, generous movement into your partner. focusing intently on their pleasure, really savoring them, but also experiencing your own erotic response through giving that pleasure.
So it's active giving, but also receiving through giving.
Sort of, yeah. It's about fervor, generosity, deep engagement with their essence. He shares an anecdote from a woman who described this really beautifully.
And being done, is that just passive receiving?
It might sound passive, but Schnarch frames it as an active surrender.
Hmm.
It's consciously allowing yourself to be pleasured, letting go of control, trusting your partner, requires its own kind of vulnerability and trust.
Makes sense. Okay, and the third one, fucking. He uses that word deliberately, I assume.
Very deliberately. He uses it to describe a specific kind of intense, two-way energy exchange, deeply connected, equally shared.
How is it different?
It often has these paradoxical qualities, feeling full and empty, primal and spiritual all at once. It's about this powerful, energetic connection, effortless flow, really seeing and accepting each other without holding back. The story of George and Betty illustrates the struggles couples might have in getting to that place of uninhibited mutual connection.
Okay. Then the book talks about the crucible of self-confrontation and critical mass. We mentioned critical mass briefly. What's the crucible part?
The crucible is that intense process of growth that happens when you're willing to really face yourself.
How so?
It means owning your projections, seeing how you put your own stuff onto your partner. It means taking responsibility for your part of the patterns. Basically, being willing to challenge your own sacred cows, your identity, how you see the world. It's tough, but transformational.
And this crucible is often heated up by critical mass.
Exactly. Critical mass is that tipping point. The pressure builds, the old ways aren't working, and it forces that self-confrontation. It's either differentiate and grow, or the relationship might fracture.
What are the signs you're reaching critical mass?
Schnarch mentions things like one partner just knows something fundamental has shifted, emotional intensity spikes way up, and you start seeing a really clear, maybe uncomfortable picture of each other's limitations.
Yikes. Sounds stressful.
It is. And he stresses that during that time, respect is vital. Empathy, too. But his definition of empathy is giving your partner a clear, honest picture of yourself, not just trying to feel what they feel. And crucially, focusing on your dilemmas, not just blaming them.
Okay. Final big idea mentioned is the spiritual dimension of differentiation, taking it even deeper.
Yeah, it's suggesting that this whole process, becoming a more solid self, connecting authentically, isn't just psychological. It can be seen as a form of self-transcendence, connecting to something larger than just your ego or the relationship itself. He brings in theologian Sebastian Moore's idea of desire out of fullness, a spirituality that embraces sensuality and self-acceptance in love. And he touches on Ken Wilber's view of differentiation, including self-preservation, adaptation, transcendence, even self-dissolution in a healthy way.
So it connects personal growth to something bigger.
Right. And Schnarch wraps up reflecting on the heroism of couples who actually do this work, this difficult path of self-development together. He emphasizes self-soothing again, especially facing inevitable losses in long-term love. He even brings in C.S. Lewis's Shadowlands, that idea that the pain of potential loss is actually part of the richness of present love.
Wow. Okay. That is a lot to take in. This has been a really fascinating look into passionate marriage. Schnarch definitely doesn't offer easy answers, but a really deep, challenging framework.
Absolutely. I mean, if you boil it down, the big takeaways are differentiation, building that solid self, is non-negotiable for real intimacy.
Right. The foundation.
Then, consciously shifting from just sensation-seeking sex towards wanting the actual person. Understanding that communication is less about perfect agreement and more about self-validation. Seeing gridlock not as an end, but a potential engine for growth through facing yourself. Using tools like the hugging or eyes open stuff to build connection and self-soothing. Understanding the richer dimensions of sex and recognizing those critical moments as chances for transformation, maybe even touching on something spiritual.
It really emphasizes that deepening intimacy is fundamentally about our own growth, doesn't it? And taking responsibility for ourselves within the relationship.
That's the core message, I think. Self-awareness, self-reliance. Those are the paths to deeper connection, paradoxically.
So for everyone listening, maybe think about which piece of this resonates most right now. Is it the differentiation idea, that shift towards intimacy-based sex? What's maybe one small thing, one small step you could explore in your own life or your relationship? Based on that, something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deck dive.